Hey, Neurofeedback moms. I am Miriam Bellamy. I am the mom who started this group, and I am the director of Whole Family Neurofeedback. Welcome to a deeper dive on what is neurofeedback. I know many of you have joined this group because you're wanting to hear from other moms, you're wanting to just learn more about neurofeedback. So I welcome you here. So to clarify, this will be about a 30-minute presentation. I'll share my screen in a minute, and you can follow along with a PowerPoint. To clarify, so I've been a licensed marriage and family therapist for almost 25 years. We talk a lot about ADHD and autism and other learning issues in the group. I am not a specialist in ADHD. I am a specialist in helping families navigate their relationships when they have family members who have ADHD or who have anxiety or who have whatever. I integrated neurofeedback into my practice about 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, and it's been transformative. But I did start doing neurofeedback for myself personally and my girls. I have 2 girls who are 20 and 17 now, almost 18, and it's just been a transformative experience for our family. So that's how I got started in this. Let's see, I've really been looking forward to doing this with you. If you are someone who you've just heard about neurofeedback, I welcome you. If you're someone who's kind of heard about it and you kind of been there and done that regarding, trying to help your child with ADHD or anxiety or autism or sensory issues, I welcome you here. And yeah, I welcome your questions. So I will at some point ask you a question or two. I invite you to put them in the comments, and I'll be monitoring that throughout the presentation. And we'll try to answer them right then. If not, I'll get to them as soon as I can. So let's see, what else for introductory? I think we're good. So here we go. Let me share my screen. Well, that's not my screen that I want to share. Give me a minute. I've got it where I need it. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay. There we go. So we're going to start with story time. I want to tell the story of a mom who needed help one night, one dark and dreary night. A mom drove her car up an icy mountain road and she lost control. Thankfully, she was thrown clear of the car, but found herself hanging by a branch over the side of a mountain. And of course, she's hanging there and she cries out and says, "Help, is there anyone up there?" And she was a bit surprised when she heard a loud, booming voice from the sky call back. "Yes, my child, I am here. Do you trust me?" And she cried back, "Yes, I trust you." And the voice called back and said, "Let go of the branch, and I will catch you before you hit the rocks below." And there was a silence, and the mom cries out, "Is there anyone else up there?" I think that is how many of us feel when our kids are hurting or they're frustrated, and when we can't quite seem to help them and get them over the hump that they need to be over or through. To grossly oversimplify, that is where I was with myself and with my girls when we first heard of neurofeedback. I had chronic health problems that I kept well hidden, and if anybody struggles with chronic health issues, you can look fine but not feel fine. And that was me for many, many years. And fatigue in particular was huge, just huge for me every day. Absolutely taken by fatigue, going along, trucking along, feeling fine, and then crash. So, and then my daughters were struggling as well. So struggling primarily with school, some anxiety, just all kinds of things. So enter neurofeedback training. actually, before we enter neurofeedback training, this is sort of my little depiction of how hard we tried. We did, supplements with the compound pharmacy that turned into candy that just didn't quite taste very good. We tried with diet, different therapies and so forth, and just really couldn't make progress. And then here comes neurofeedback training, and that's my youngest when we first started this. And that look on her face, that was different. So just real quickly, after my 6th session, so we decided to rent the equipment. Let me say that first too. We looked at all the different neurofeedbacks that were out there. I had heard about nonlinear neurofeedback and just felt it was the better match for my family. I looked in town here, and we got quoted $2,500 for one family member to rent the equipment. It was less than $1,000, and every family member could train, and we did. After my 6th session, I felt rested, and I realized for the first time in 20 years, I hadn't felt rested when I woke up in the morning, and suddenly I did. I didn't even know I had a problem with sleep. I knew I was tired all the time, and I could sleep easily, but I didn't get that rested feeling, and all of a sudden I did. I started feeling calm. I started feeling joy again in my life, and it was just this incredible experience. For my youngest, some of you I'm sure have heard this story, but if you haven't, she was getting C's, D's, and F's in school, and she went from a CDF student to an AB student. I'll never forget the day that she came home. Sorry, she's texted us a picture of there was a posting on the wall at school of all the kids who made honor roll, and her name was on it. And she just was like, I think this is a mistake. It's like, no, this is not a mistake. You did this. She was transformed as a student. She was also transformed at home, where she went from pretty sullen and withdrawn to incredibly affectionate, loving, happy. That's probably one of the biggest effects I'll see with her. She's just happy. It really helps with her mood regulation. So that's her now. She's a senior. She's almost headed to college. And I'll say this too. So we had such profound results that obviously I started a practice, whole family neurofeedback. And this is my dad enjoying it. So that's one of the benefits of either renting or purchasing, is you can share with other family members who are going through health issues. After my dad had a couple of sessions, he didn't feel so great for a day, but after that, he called me up and said that he felt better than he had felt in a very long time, in years. And so it's one of the benefits there. I am curious see if I can get back to you, what your interest is in neurofeedback. So if you're listening, would you type in the comments and let me know sort of, how you learned about it, what you're looking for, what family members do you feel like really could benefit from it? And I'll give us just a sec to hear about that. So I'll go ahead and keep going, but I will be checking for comments. Like I said, as we go, anytime you have a question or a comment, please feel free to put it in the comments, and I'll answer it as soon as I see it. Okay, so let's get back here. What is neurofeedback? All right, so I think of it as two things. I think of it as brain training, and I think of it as mind training. So what do I mean by that? So brain training it actually impacts the physiology of the brain. Think of it as defragging your hard drive. You can think of it as the brain as a swift moving current, right? It is constantly in motion. It is never not in motion. Think of the World Wide Web, right? Constantly moving and processing information. And so what neurofeedback does is sort of think of a river, this raging river that kind of gets clogged up, gets full of sediment, or gets full of algae or seaweed or whatever. The neurofeedback actually helps to clear that and helps things flow better. And research has shown That, for example, with ADHD, that, they can't find this one part of the brain that they can identify that that's where ADHD is. What they have found more recently in research is that the problems have more to do with the brain being able to communicate across itself, right? Not just left to right. We hear about left and right brain, but top and bottom brain as well. And so it helps that processing, helps smooth it out, helps the brain communicate with itself. What is mind training? Mind training has to do with, as the brain starts to improve, the mind starts to improve. The mind isn't something that's sort of theoretical anymore. Neuroscience is revealing just how interconnected we are. So when I think of the mind, I think of relationships and how one brain, one person communicates with another. And so, again, as the brain improves, the mind improves. Our ability to respect another person, our ability to not freak out when someone else is freaking out. That self-regulation piece. And so I look at neurofeedback as both brain and mind training, really impacting our relationships. I also look at it as a barrier eliminator. What do I mean by that? So um, a lot of times people will start to think of neurofeedback as some kind of a cure. And if your child, quote, no longer has ADHD, then they're not going to have any problems in life. And I know we know that's not true, but we get in there, and if our child has a problem, they've done neurofeedback, they've done really well, and all of a sudden now they've got a problem, another problem, that that the neurofeedback didn't work or something like that. And nothing could be further from the truth. For us, my daughter doesn't have the kind of problems that she has with school anymore. She is a good student. She's able to function. But guess what? She has relationship problems. She's discovering her what it's like to be a girlfriend or a friend and that kind of thing. It enables people to function better in the world, and they get in the world and they're going to face challenges, but they're not going to have those same old barriers that they had before. And I think that's just profound. So it is a barrier eliminator. And this is actually one of my favorite quotes of all time. I have it on my wall and I have it on a mug. Neurofeedback is an incredibly empowering experience. Because you begin to realize that you have within you the ability to heal and function better. Because that's all, particularly nonlinear neurofeedback, that's what it's tapping into, is your own ability to improve, to grow. So in the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. I do see real quick, we do have a question about any experience with ADHD and or dyslexia. I hope that you're beginning to hear some of that already. Yes, and actually my youngest that I was telling you about has ADHD and dyslexia. And her ability to process and read and write, her handwriting changed. I think with ADHD and dyslexia, you've got one of the things we used to have with her is her room would just be a disaster. Now, as parents, as a way of doing that, we have held that her room is hers. And that's one of the things we saw when she started doing neurofeedback. She started being able to order her life. And so she started cleaning out her room. She's gotten into a habit now where she makes her bed every day. We didn't do that. She started doing that. She started creating that order. So yes, I have tons of experience with seeing kids helped with both of those issues. So we talked about what neurofeedback is. What is neurofeedback not? It is not voodoo. It sounds like science fiction, but it's not. It was discovered, which we'll talk about, in a lab at UCLA accidentally. It's been replicated. There have been thousands of studies on neurofeedback demonstrating its efficacy for helping people with a whole host of issues. So it's not voodoo. It's real. There aren't any chemicals involved. I say that it's not risky because that's a couple of points on that one. It's not risky because there's no harm that's going to be done to your brain. No matter what kind of neurofeedback you do, You don't have to worry about harm being done. You could have a bumpy ride if you have a linear neurofeedback with a practitioner who isn't paying attention or who's just sticking to certain protocols instead of being able to intuitively or from experience be able to make adjustments and that kind of thing. But it's not harmful, okay? I say the other point with risky is I think there's inherent risk anytime someone improves, someone gets better. And so what does that look like? So actually an example from our group. So the child was doing neurofeedback, mom was doing it too, yay mom, but the child started getting in trouble at school. And so what the heck is going on, right? And really encourage the mom to talk with her son, figure out what is going on. Why is this kid who was never, ever in trouble before now in trouble all the time? Why are the teachers freaking out? Key phrase there, the teachers were freaking out. Because what the mom found is that this child who was really kind of shut down, shy, not happy, suddenly started feeling happy. And that's what he told her. He says, I don't know, mom, I'm just happy. Well, when he's happy, what's he doing? He's talking to his friends. And what's happening with anxious teachers, right? They're freaking out. So in that, there's some kind of risk. When a family member starts to change, there's going to be risk. There's going to be an impact in the family. Remember, it's sort of, we're not just a brain, we're also mind. And in that mind is a family brain, just because of just how interconnected we are. Okay, enough on that. It is not risky. It's safe. It is not electroshock therapy. So there's no electrical current going into the brain except for one form of neurofeedback. It's actually called LENS, L-E-N-S. And they do introduce a slight electrical impulse. Their point is to try to create chaos in the brain so the brain will reorder itself. No other form of neurofeedback does that. The sensors are on the scalp just to read the electrical activity, not to put any in. It is not hypnosis. You're not brought to a particular hypnotic state. It is non-invasive, particularly nonlinear neurofeedback. We'll talk more about why that is. It is not computer-assisted meditation. It's a much deeper process. It's a much more comprehensive process, particularly, again, with nonlinear, because we are getting to the unconscious functioning in the brain, levels of brain function. I'll put it that way. Okay. All right, let's talk about the history. I love this. And so, again, I did this just for people who want that deeper dive, who want to geek out a little bit on neurofeedback. I love the story of how neurofeedback was discovered. Probably because I'm obsessed with cats. That's our first neurofeedback recipient were cats. So this is Barry Sturman. He is still researching neurofeedback today. He is still a leader in that field. But very early in his career, so almost 60 years ago, Sturman was doing research on sort of Pavlovian type research, trying to understand the Pavlovian response, but looking at the brain waves at the same time. So so what's happening in the brain with this, well, while there is this learning that's happening, right? That a dog would learn to salivate with the sound of a bell. What's happening in the brain? So he had about 30 cats in this study that started it all. And they didn't have access to food, right? They weren't starving, but they were, certain times of day to eat, right? They were hungry. They were taken out one at a time, and I'll show you sort of what this looked like. Brought to an empty room with nothing but an empty bowl and a lever. The cats learned very quickly what to do to get food. Press the lever, they get food. So then Sturman varied the experiment. A tonal sound was added such that when it was playing, if the cats pressed the lever, it would not produce the food. When the tonal sound was not playing, the cats could then press the lever and obtain food. So it was during this phase of the experiment that Sturman noticed that the brain of the cats, the brain state of the cats, while they were very still, they were very alert. So in this moment, when they were waiting for that tonal sound to stop, very alert, particular brain state. So he began to wonder if the cats could produce this brain state at will. So he varied the experiment again. No lever, no tonal sound. But when the cats got into this brain state, for half a second initially, they were rewarded with food. Very quickly, the cats learned to produce this brain state at will. Incredible. And it's important to note that this brain state was highly stable, okay? Think of an athlete who is that focused calm, right? They're very aware of the surroundings. They're ready for performance, I guess I'll say, athletic performance. And so this was a significant study that you could train the brain, okay? But this still wasn't quite neurofeedback. That was reproduced, the study was reproduced, published in journals, the whole shebang. So Sturman kind of made a name for himself with this study, and he was approached by NASA. And it was a need to understand what's happening in the brains of astronauts as they're impacted by rocket fuel, right? It was known to cause seizures, hallucinations, all kinds of neurological problems, and they were needing to sort of get a better picture of what was happening. So Sturman took a group of cats, another group of cats. He introduced the cats to rocket fuel, noted the predictable neurological decline. So fatigue, weakness, then hallucinations, then seizures, and then death. All but in 9 cats in the study who showed a much higher threshold for seizures. And Sturman realized that these 9 cats were from his previous study. These were the cats who had ultra-stable brains. It meant that the changes that took place in the cats in his original studies were physiological and long-lasting. So very quickly, it was applied to humans. There was, I believe, a secretary who had epilepsy. And in this first study, and I'll tell you about this study, when the participants got their brain in this particular state, this ultra-stable state, they were given a green light. When they were out of that state, they were given a red light. That basic of a reward for the brain. And the results in this initial study showed a 65% reduction in grand mal seizures for overall as an average for the participants, but some had their seizures disappear entirely. NASA at this point adopted the neurofeedback training to get those ultra-stable brains for their astronauts. So neurofeedback was born. And it has come a very long way since then. Technology is vastly more advanced and more capable of processing way more data. And the more data we get from the brain, the more precise we can become about the feedback, right? And as you guys know, if you don't know, we use Neuroptimal. It's the most robust system on the market. So let me talk a little bit about what I mean by that. Let's see. So there are 2 categories of neurofeedback. There's linear and nonlinear neurofeedback. Linear neurofeedback starts with a brain map. I know there's a movement in that world where some of the better practitioners are foregoing the brain map. I don't know that they're advertising it, but in the context that I have, this is what I'm beginning to understand, because they're realizing that there is a faultiness to the brain map. I've shared with many of you that you'll have one brain map and 6 practitioners. You're going to have 6 different interpretations, okay? So they do start with a brain map. It is somewhat of an indicator of where to begin. They're also going to, if it's a good practitioner, they're going to take a good history. They're going to understand the symptoms. They're going to get that kind of feedback so they have a fuller clinical picture to fill in some of the gaps. From there, it's a linear neurofeedback is a protocol-based neurofeedback. And so if your brain looks a particular way, or if you have ADHD, it's this X protocol. If you've got autism, it's another protocol. If you've got anxiety, it's another protocol. One of the things that they run into and why you need a good practitioner, if you're an excellent practitioner, if you're going for linear neurofeedback, is that they're going to have to recognize when protocols are conflicting. They're going to have to be able to switch back and forth and really address the unique person that you are or that your child is, okay? So it's practitioner-based neurofeedback, it's protocol-based neurofeedback, and it is based on that brain map. With neuroptimal or the nonlinear neurofeedback, we do something called dynamic thresholding instead. So let me give you a comparison. In the linear world, the fastest I've seen is when I did all my research, they were looking at 2 measurements of the cortical activity 8 times a second. Neuroptimal gets 4 measurements of the cortical activity 256 times a second. And we're doing it every session, and we're basing the feedback on that real-time data. So we're basing that feedback on you, not on a statistical norm. And I just think that's profound, because that, to me, is closer to how the brain actually works. It's the World Wide Web, and a brain map is a snapshot of that. With nonlinear, you're actually getting a movie. You're getting that ongoing, what is this looking like? It's much more information. So let's see. And so let's talk about, so with linear neurofeedback, what they're doing, they're identifying different brain waves that they want to either increase, they want to reward, or they want to decrease, right? They want to sort of fade away or just become less, or both, okay? And so if they want to increase alpha, let's say, if your brain is in alpha, then you're going to get some kind of reward from a video game. Let's say you'll get color, you'll get sound, or a TV show that you're watching. When they want to down train something, then they'll take away color, or they'll slow it down, something like that. Your brain really likes the little pings or the color or something like that. And so it will reward the brain waves that it thinks that they believe will work best for that particular brain. Okay. With nonlinear, what we're doing is actually calling the brain to attention to itself. What we're doing is tapping into what the brain already does, and does really well. Even if you got a child with ADHD or whatever, and you don't think their brain, can really tap into that kind of stuff, they can, okay? And we help it do it better. So let me explain. So if you think of a child who's learning to walk, how does a child learn to walk? How in the world does that happen? Okay, what's happening in the brain? So many things are happening, but it's organized by the central nervous system, right? The central nervous system has 2 functions. It is, one, there to detect difference. So if you think about you're sitting in a room and all of a sudden it starts getting really cold, your central nervous system is constantly monitoring temperature to keep you at homeostasis. So it makes adjustments based on the changes that it perceives. If you get a scratch on your leg, it perceives that as a change, and it asks, what do I need to do? And that's the second part. That's the second function of the central nervous system. What do I need to do? So I'm looking for difference, and what do I need to do to address it? Do I need to address it, or is it good, right? So that's what's happening during a nonlinear neurofeedback session, is the system is detecting difference, okay? So let me just to complete the metaphor. If a child's learning to walk, there's sort of this constant feedback loop of what's changing. So if you look at this child, wearing shoes is going to be a difference. Walking in mud, walking in water, walking on dry land, all of those things are going to be parts of this feedback loop. And the child, slowly over time, will be detecting that, the brain will, and then we'll be making adjustments so that the child can learn to walk and then learn to run and so forth. So, so in a nonlinear neurofeedback session, the system is looking for, again, 4 measurements, 256 times a second. It's looking for when your brain goes to do something different, and it does it in a turbulent or an unstable way. When that happens, the person's listening to music or watching a movie, we deliver a break in the sound. That break triggers a reflex in the brain. So, your knees have a reflex, so does your brain. It's fascinating the more you learn about the brain. And so it brings the brain, that break brings the brain to the present moment. So again, think about this as a metaphor. You're walking through the woods. All of a sudden you hear a stick break off to the left. Instantly, your brain and you are in the present moment. Okay, you're observing. We're able to do that when we put the break in the sound. It brings the brain, alerts the brain to itself, to its own turbulence. The brain learns from that, right? The brain's whole design is to create order out of chaos, okay? to make sense of the information it's processing. So it sees its own stuckness, how tuned in it is, let's say, to the stress response, and it sees the inefficiency of that, and it's able to self-regulate, okay? And so over time, the brain learns to function better. And so we see all kinds of things. So I just described that session. That's what a hookup looks like. So we'll see over time, the top three things that we see are people will become way more resilient to stress, right? And worry, and that sort of keyed up central nervous system. We'll see them sleeping through the night, falling asleep easier, waking up feeling refreshed like I felt. And then we'll see an improvement in focus. And I can say I have experienced all of these consistently. And so I was just describing what some of these shifts and results are. One of the questions I'll get pretty regularly is around, is it permanent? There are people in neurofeedback who are saying, you do your 40 sessions, you'll never need neurofeedback again. I don't find that to be true. I find that, and that goes with linear or nonlinear neurofeedback. If you, depending on genetics, stress, the stress that eating, a really bad diet will put on you. Did I say genetics? Family relationships, huge changes in your life stage changes, all the kind of things that we go through. Those are times when your brain might need a reminder. And so your brain will never forget what it learned with the neurofeedback, okay? But it may need a reminder because we can get stuck in stress mode in our brains. Let's see. I did include, if you want to read here, some of these comments that I have gotten from our clients. This is actually one of our group moms who I love working with. If you want to read that. She worked slow and steady, and just saw wonderful shifts with her son. And if you ever want me to send these to you, if you're not getting through them, then I will be happy. This is someone who wrote me about his marriage, where resentment melted away, and I actually can attest to this. The more sessions you do with nonlinear, the more, for me anyways, it gets to places where I am just that much more rigid, where I'm really hold on to old beliefs, consciously or unconsciously. It's where I really am stuck. And my marriage was one of those places, and really helped. And so helped Frank as well. This is another mom who not only saw herself sort of coming out of a fog, mood and brain fog, and just not being able to, be organized in her home, just the heaviness and the weight of all family life and so forth. Her 95-year-old aunt was able to benefit. Her 9-year-old son, who she had no idea was experiencing, some, he called it a black hole of what if, and he was able to have this lovely shift as well. Another mama whose daughter was really struggling at school and all of a sudden just exploded, and they weren't sure if she was going to be heading to the 3rd grade, but she did. Pretty excited for her. So let's talk briefly about resources to continue your research. One of the books I started with was A Symphony in the Brain by a journalist named Jim Robbins. It's an older book, but it's definitely a classic in the neurofeedback world. Great stories, great objective representation in that book. Another resource I'm not sure if many people know about is in the guides section of our group. So if you go to the top of the Neurofeedback Moms group, if you choose guides, you're going to find lots of videos, ones that I've done myself, expert interviews. The developer of Neuroptimal itself, I've done a couple interviews with him. So that's a great resource if you want to deepen your research there. Connecting with other moms in the group. I think that's why a lot of you joined. You can also go, if you want to learn more about Neuroptimal or nonlinear neurofeedback, you can go to neuroptimal.com or then my website, Whole Family Neurofeedback. And there are many more resources. So if you have already read these or you want to keep going, please reach out to me. You can email me at Miriam at wholefamilyneurofeedback.com. Let's see if I think that's the end. And I'm coming back. So yeah, Miriam at wholefamilyneurofeedback.com. Miriam is Miriam. You can also put in the comments, you can PM me in Messenger. But thank you so much for listening and adding your question. And please feel free to do so and review this. And, whatever questions you have, let me know. All right. Have a great day, guys.